So, hi everyone. My name is Roy Kim. I'm a Microsoft MVP, and I've been working with SharePoint for a long time and some Azure as well recently. And so today I'll be talking about various Power Apps techniques. So this is I want to demonstrate a scenario in my kind of my demo, my SharePoint Office 365 tenant on a Power App facilitating a what I like to call a self-assessment app for COVID-19 in these current times, right? And how that employees can do kind of self-assessments, and really it's just really like a deep dive implementation walkthrough of various techniques that I've listed here. So this is built with a SharePoint list kind of backend for the data, some data querying and filtering, how the UI works, the design control, the UI design and some of the controls, how the data is saved back into a SharePoint list, how to use Power Apps, Power Automate for like a simple email notification.
عزیزم سوپم گرم کردی
Okay.
بخوری؟
And
آه
some simple concurrency checking, okay, as well. And some performance considerations I've been kind of tackling, especially around large lists, testing and debugging techniques. This is really key. Basic monitoring and how I've approached like some backup and restore techniques. Okay, and also I forgot to list this. So some basic Azure integration, right? To like blob storage or like various data connections. So I'll talk about that. So I like to make this session quite collaborative. Of course, you can always people can always watch video recordings, but I think the unique value in us coming to this meetup is to, ask direct questions in the chat or come off mute, and so that it's kind of more personal and engaging for yourself and for everyone. So I like to encourage that. Okay, so why don't I just jump in here? So as you guys know, Power Apps is a kind of no code, low code application kind of development kind of environment. Okay. And so it's loosely, I guess, a successor to or evolutionary successor to InfoPath, one can say, but it's completely different. So what I have here is a what I like a self-assessment app, and as you can see the shape of it, it's I chose the phone layout, right? So it can also run on your mobile phone, and as you run it, you log in with the current user, right? And so the data is specific to that to the user. So this the scenario is like kind of day by day, like a user employee would kind of do like a self-assessment and also register kind of also where they're going to work at, whether it be in office or work from home, and maybe you're for compliance reasons or for tracking or like employee health and safety reasons, to of course to track whether you have symptoms or not, and just to keep and for contact tracing purposes, right? So I thought that would be a neat scenario, right, to demonstrate with Power Apps, right? So what this is it's really simple, but there's a lot of details into it, which I'll get into, but functionally it's quite simple. So of course, um, like these are SharePoint list records. It's all preloaded as kind of empty records, right? With by date, and one would just go in and it's based on the currently logged in user, and you got to do kind of day by day. So do you have symptoms? Yes or no? Things like you want to show that you're on vacation if that's relevant. Um, and if you're like not coming into like not working at all, right? So this can be empty too, right? Which office, right? You know, or if you're like at home as an option too, you know. And if you're coming into, let's say, an office, okay, to track how many, like if you're gonna come and if you're gonna bring a like a guest, let's say a client and such, right? And like, okay, so I just want to show this one. So, and then here is a little HTML based widget I'll talk about. And so here I've kind of registered kind of three, and there's also a maximum, of how many can be registered, right? For, like to meet social distancing kind of guidelines, depending on the size of that work site, that office. So if I do six, I hit save, right? Let's see, go Ottawa, and then that number has been, updated as well, right? And there's various conditional rules as well, right? So if you hit above 40, right? So if other users come in and they, this number would decrement when other users log in and take up space, right? Or if they kind of cancel, or switch between offices, those numbers update too, right? Whoops, not that one. This one right here. So I believe I switched over to kind of Montreal, and then this number came back up to 40. And another piece of functionality is, let's say that, okay, you're going to say that you do have symptoms, based on the definition at that time, right? An email would come through as well, right? So email, okay, let me show this email. Um, this email just popped up at this current time, and so keep that tracking as an email, just to demonstrate the Power Automate as well. Okay. And so, and then you can kind of query and tab through like by week, by 7 days. Okay. Um, so that's a piece of functionality, and kind of a side. And also I also want to demonstrate kind of Azure integration, which doesn't really have any relevance to this scenario, but I'll talk about more here is like, um, certain controls on, um, let's say, saving a camera image, and that goes to like Azure Blob storage, right? So things like that, right? Um, so that's an example there, and hit back, and then um, so that's kind of the general overview of the functionality, right? Certain refreshing as well. So any questions so far? Okay, I'm looking at the chat window if there's anything.
No, not so far.
Oh,
Sorry,
nothing.
we are
Okay.
still here. I know it feels like sometimes you're screaming into the canyon.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, cool. So I'll just continue on. So so that's the overall kind of functional demo. I'll get into kind of some implementation techniques, right? So um, so I kind of talked about various like how each screen works. Um, so in terms of the kind of the design of the application, kind of how data is, so it's just two SharePoint lists, right? One is a list for kind of each day, for that particular user, and tracking kind of symptoms, if it's on vacation, et cetera, right? And then there's another list that uh, that's like a reference list, okay, that tracks for each office, let's say, and you want to track for each day what is the limit, right? That you can people can come in for, again, the social distancing reasons, right? And then track how many has been filled and how many are open at that day. Okay, so the limit and the open would have to be kind of pre-populated, right? And the dates, right? For let's say, for like let's say the next 6 months, right? So that is the work site, right? And so these two lists work together, right, to make the overall functional kind of application solution. Okay, so if I were to show that, let's say here, so I put in my HR group site, and if I do, let's say here, this list is for kind of, let's say, all your employees. These are some test users I made, et cetera, right? I ran a PowerShell script to kind of pre-populate kind of all the data. So my approach has been like, you don't really create new records for each day. It's pre-populated, right? Just felt like it was easier in that way. But then you can arrive at
Roy,
yeah.
I was just going to ask a couple questions. I think
Sure, yeah,
maybe
go
you've
ahead.
answered some of them. One of them was just around scalability. So if you've got large number of employees recording daily, there's obviously list limit issues there, but if you're recording on top of, then that's okay. So then are you using the version history to be able to go back in time? Is that the strategy?
No, just so I manage it. So definitely there's going to be the threshold, right? But it's just through. So the assumption is okay. Some design assumptions is that this won't be infinitely scalable. Like it's just assumed that okay, well, COVID's not going to happen forever, right? So maybe for the next 6 months, right? And also depending on how many employees or whatever, right? But the way I managed it is kind of indexing columns, right? And also, which I'll get into, is the actual query itself, right? So that you can query. Um, you're not kind of scanning through everything, so to
But
speak.
from a general scaling assumptions, is it safe to say, this would work for, say, 1,000 employees for the next 200 days?
Oh, currently no. That's 100 employees times. Don't think so. Not that much.
But 100, or what was sort of your assumptions around that side?
Probably, let's see here, 300. So yeah, a little bit less than that, I forgot how I calculated it. I built this like a couple months ago.
Okay, I was just curious,
So
no worries.
yeah, but definitely not like largely scalable, like you know what I mean. But yeah, this is kind of just kind of demo and stuff, right? So, but if that comes to mind, if you want to be largely scalable, then the recommendation is to do like let's say Azure SQL, you know,
Or common
or
data service or something like
or
that.
Excel or something like that, you know. So
Okay,
yeah, or
cool.
common data service, right? So but it's overall it's very easy to get up and going with SharePoint lists because of the very tight with the integration, and building a list is easy, and especially if you're a SharePoint person, right? You have SharePoint expertise, right? So, but yeah, that is definitely a design kind of the scalability is definitely a key limitation, right, with this approach. But yeah, it does depend on kind of the number of days, or and then multiplied by the number of employees, right? And to kind of mitigate those issues by indexing columns, also the querying, and also maybe like archiving like past data, right? Data that's happened in the past, right? That's expired, let's say, a couple weeks ago, right? You kind of archive that in a way. So that's kind of uh, how to go about that. So, um, does that help answer? Any other questions?
It does. Thanks, Roy.
Okay, cool. Yeah, no, very good question. And I think I'll talk about the query about that a bit more. um, some tips and tricks. So here we have kind of the Power Apps editor. Okay, and so you have here a browse screen detail. So, I took this from kind of your vanilla, like one of those demo apps, and I just kind of adapted it. So this is your browse screen, your detail screen, which I'm not really using. Like it's this one right here, right? Um, and it just goes straight into the edit screen. Okay. Let's see here. So when I click this, it navigates to the edit screen. Okay, and then I also wanted to show kind of file upload right here. So I created another screen. Okay, and that's navigatable through this button. Okay, um, and that goes to like Azure Blob container, which I'll show in a bit. Okay, it could be you have a scenario where you just want to capture some photos, right? Of some sort in that time of day, and then just and then in a very scalable way, throw in a lot of photos in there, right? And that'll be more scalable than a SharePoint document library for photos, but in Azure Blob container, which is this thing right here, Azure storage account, right? And see if I refresh. Let's see here. Yeah, this one, this 1118. That's just right now. I just took a camera photo, and that was uploaded, right? So, but I'll get back to that in a bit. So let's see here, and browse screen, detail screen, and edit screen. Okay, so the browse screen, I'll talk about data querying. Okay, so in terms of data querying, there's something called a browse gallery right here, which is kind of just returns a set of records. Okay, and within the records are a bunch of fields. Okay, so here's a row. This is kind of like a templated kind of a layout, right? For the title column, a subtitle, and a body that you would assign, like that you would map to, right? And then for me, I just shifted around kind of the layout as I see fit, right? Um, and just like kind of HTML, or in like, or even PowerPoint, you have properties, as you all know, like if you guys played around with it, padding and sizing and such, you know. So, um, and okay, if I go to this, okay, this is connected to a data source. Okay, like this whole browse gallery is hitting against a data source, right? So it's going against right here the self-assessment library. Okay, um, with which I called it. So you can see if you can go to here from data. No, I think connectors, was it? Uh, yeah, oh yeah, right here. So this one. So it's connected to the SharePoint list and my worksite list, right? And that's how I can bring that information into this browse gallery, okay, by selecting on the data source, and also choose. Um, so these are the SharePoint columns, and I choose it to like the body, okay? What is designated as the body in this layout, okay? Same thing as Office and Subtitle and Subtitle 1. So it's kind of a predefined layout, but you map the SharePoint list columns to these designated kind of, let's say, placeholders. Okay. And then once you do that, then I can kind of style it and move it around, whatever I see fit. Okay. So one little tip is that when you're editing this, you're only editing this first row, and any changes are replicated because it's a repeating control, basically in ASP.NET old terminology, a repeating control. So you can't really adjust. The first time as a newbie, I was like trying to adjust these things, and I was confused. So, but it's just this one, the first row, that you're just adjusting. Okay. Now, for the query for the browse gallery, let me go back here. So, browse gallery. So it has a bunch of properties. Okay, so dot items, like browse gallery dot items. Okay, this is where you bring in the data. Okay, so basically sort by columns, filter with self-assessment, like the list name, and then the title field starts with my email address, like currently logged in user email, okay, and then some date filtering, right? So between two designated dates, okay, today and the next 7 days, something like that, okay, and then kind of sorting, ascending and descending. So there's a flag here. It's a variable. If that's true, then descending. If it's false, then it's ascending. And so that flag, that variable, is this thing right here. So if you click on it, it'll just toggle true and false, true and false. You know what I mean? But back to the query, okay, is this guy right here, right? So again, starts with title, user email, and then in between two certain dates. So because I'm filtering by title, okay, and two in between two dates, and then if and I index this column, okay, um, then that helps with the kind of the large list issue right there. So I think with this you can have many employees, but if you have many days, right, you might hit the list view threshold, many days for that specific user. Okay, so so that's kind of a way, something to watch out for. The querying is very important. Okay, and you get like certain warning signs, right, about the querying. So one thing to keep in mind is that sometimes if you do it inefficiently, like PowerApps, like the query will be executed such you're scanning everything, okay, um, as opposed to passing the query instruction to the server side, okay, which will be more efficient when it's passed to the server side, and it'll do like a more efficient querying, okay. But it all depends on kind of like this type of function, okay. So like this is a PowerApps function, like starts with, okay, um, and this one works well, okay. If you do, I can't think of another one, was it equals or something? If you do something like you say title equals user email, that may be kind of less efficient. Okay. Um, uh, from a Power Apps point, it doesn't know how to handle that, and then translate that query just to the like the server side. Okay. Hopefully that makes sense, right? Um, so that's how kind of querying works. Okay. So it really starts with the filter um, by the email and date, and then sort by columns. Okay. And then there's a parameter to show ascending or descending. So that's kind of how that works. And the output of that comes up to here. Okay. Um, and so the next thing is if we go to the app level, okay, so this is kind of like the top level here, and then there's some properties like on start. So for me, I just only cared about the on start. And so this is to set some, let's say, global variables. Okay, so I set a variable called index days global to 0. Okay, so this is like an indexer to help track kind of the previous 7 days and next 7 days, kind of like to track that part. Okay. Um, so let's see here. So I use that right here. So when I click next, I add like 7 days to it, right? And then that value is tracked in this variable. And then for this one here, set user set okay, I'm creating a variable called user email. So I'm taking, so this function, okay, says, get me the currently logged in user's email address, okay? And I'm kind of trimming it for white spaces and lower casing it, right, to make it normalized, so that it's, I know that it's like a lowercase email because I use that for kind of the query and for queries, for conditional filtering, as I've shown you before. So with that, I have that's how you do kind of global level variables. Okay, and then the set button. Okay, called here button next 7 days. As you see here, update context, that will help update my variables, right? So for example, set index days global, I increment by 7 days. Okay, if I click on this button, I decrement by 7 days, right? And so that's kind of how I manage this specific kind of application global variable. Okay. Let's see here. So that's a certain technique I've used. Let's see here. What else can icons. So here, just some UI controls, some icons, icon 2, which is this button right here. And I say things like on select, navigate to the file upload screen, which is this guy right here. Okay. And then, adding labels, like for example, this is a label, and I say, label.text, set it as the currently logged in user's full name. Okay, so it's pretty straightforward with that, kind of very formula based. Okay, next I have is browse gallery. So that's pretty much it there. Okay. And anything in particular? No. Okay. So, okay, going back to this, just to kind of track my talking points here. So I talked about the user interface, the browse screen, edit screen, UI validation, drop down combo. Okay, so let's talk about, show you kind of the edit screen right here. Okay, so so this whole let's see here. So this whole form, edit form, is comprised of these kind of what do you call, like, fields, okay, which is mapped to the respective kind of SharePoint column. Okay. So if I go employee, let's see here, assessment date. So this would show kind of the user's name. Okay. Let's see, where would how does that work? So edit field. Again, here's my kind of the SharePoint list, and I choose that the fields to show up right in this edit screen. So I have employee assessment date, the ordering, etc. Okay. So that's kind of how that looks like, and also what kind of control. So this is like a view only. You can't. It's not editable. So if you do edit, then you get that. Whoops. Okay, hold on. I want to, whoops, go back. Employee views. Okay. So that's how that works. Okay. And let's say for drop down kind of validation. Let's see here. So let's see on change. Let's see, depends on display mode. Okay, so the way I do validation is, so here's the submit button, okay? And this submit button has a quite a bit of logic in here, Okay, so one way of doing validation is, let's say I'm checking whether it's blank. Okay, so the symptoms um, like field. Okay, I check that in the work site, the number of people. I check that they're not like they're not blank, and if not, then I have a notification. Okay, please fill out all fields. Okay, so if I, how do I, okay, let's see if I can demonstrate this. So say, for example, this one, I hit that. That's what that looks like. So you can have a notification bar, okay, show up. And this is of type warning. So it's like kind of yellow color. You can do type error or type kind of success. You can show like error message or notifications in like as a label. You can pop up a label, but this is kind of like a toast style notification with a certain kind of like a delay, right? And then it'll just kind of disappear on its own, as you see right there. So that's how one way of doing kind of user control validation. Okay, just having straight if logic. Okay. And so in terms of saving the data, it all comes down to this um, formula or this function right here. So let's see here, update context, right? Um, so this is a certain variable, okay? And so the number of people, because I'm tracking, how many people have been registered, right? So I'm tracking for those things, okay? Okay, so in terms of saving the data function, oh, select work sites. Oh, okay, got it. Update set. Okay, it's this. Okay, it is this set function right here. So worksite item, okay, is the from the worksite list, okay, because I want to I want to update the number um, that what was in that worksite, okay, and I want to do it by kind of by day, right? Value lookup and um, sorry, no, actually, sorry, this is a variable. So this is a lookup on the work sites list, and this is a filter condition, right, based on the date and the work site. So if you chose Toronto, it'll get this work site record. Okay, and see work site, um, and then kind of update the numbers there. And then finally, I get to this we call select function work sites. Okay. Let's see here. So this is a button right here. So let me go to that. Okay. So this is like a hidden button. Okay, so what I'm doing here is I'm doing kind of like a functional programming because this logic was getting long. So I wanted to kind of organize and have kind of like a what do you call like a helper function, right? But there's no real concept of a helper function here, because it's really just like formula based, right? There's no functional programming. This is not object-oriented programming. This is like basically like kind of very, very simple kind of a scripting language. Okay. Um, so for me to kind of organize things to make it more manageable, I created a my own little helper function. Okay, by creating a button. Okay, so what this is see here, func update work sites. Um, what it really is a button somewhere on this page. Okay, and um, uh, and by saying select this button will execute whatever is in the button. Okay, So this is another kind of set of logic and operations I have here, but I've kind of packaged that up in a hidden button. Okay, so um, again, when you hit this button, it executes this logic, and then I have this select func worksites, which is basically saying click on another button, which is this guy, which has all this logic. Okay, because like it was getting unmanageable. Like imagine having this whole piece in in let's say, where was it? Whoops. Uh, in having that chunk of like quote unquote code and having it like, embedded, in this would be like 3 4 pages long, and it's just crazy, right? So that's kind of what I've done. And I think was it, I think Dennis, who's on this call, I think he gave me that tip, so just kudos and shout out to him for that. So and he gave me some other debugging tips as well, so which I'll talk to in a bit. So again, this is a technique I've done, and so far it works, right? But there are some nuances to avoid, that you don't want to do that all throughout. Um, but that's a certain technique that I've utilized. So, in any questions, I'll just pause right here. Okay. Oh, I see a question here from before. How does this compare to MS bookings? From Naveen. So actually, I'm not really familiar with MS bookings, but um, if if you want to clarify what that is, and maybe I can uh, answer that kind of at a conceptual level. But yeah, I don't know what MS bookings is.
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
Recently we've been doing like unpacking, other things within the agency, and always bookings is the first step we're trying to map, those schedules to. So I was
Mm-hmm.
just wondering, what functionality, with does the Power Apps provide more than bookings? I know like it provides better UI front end, a lot more options for the end users, right?
Mm-hmm.
And also Power Automate integration, which bookings does not have. But I was
Mm-hmm.
just wondering in general, if you have a better idea between both those
So
apps.
is MS bookings like an app, or can you build like applications? Is it
It's an already available Office 365 app.
okay, but for like scheduling, right?
Right, right.
Oh, okay, okay. So, um, like that's just a like a custom off the shelf application, right? Where Power Apps, you can build anything. Okay. So you can, try to build or emulate MS bookings, right? But in a more custom fashion. But maybe you can integrate the two somehow, right? If MS Bookings can trigger something or integrate with Power Automate, that can be a possibility. But yeah, Power Apps is a completely like application, kind of no code, low code environment. Does that answer your question?
Yep. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, great. So, um, that's kind of what I have with this functionality, walking through the kind of the general save logic. Okay. So let's see here. Let's go back to um, and okay, another little kind of UI widget right here is let's say you can't really get the layout or the look and feel that you want. Okay, so this approach here is really HTML table, right? So you have a lot more control in terms of a layout, because you can't really do this, or I haven't really figured it out, like using just the bare, the out of the box Power Apps controls, right? So what I have here is like these numbers are dynamic, right? Like the how many are open versus how many are like a max limit, Okay, so I'll show you the HTML here. So it's just a straight, simple HTML table, and I have the control of kind of what color, the padding, the styling, and all that stuff, right? And then where I want data or to be dynamic, I have something called value lookup. This is the SharePoint list. Um, where it's like a filter where the work site is Toronto and how many are open. Okay. And then the value of um, where the work site is Toronto, and then how many is the limit. Okay. So if I were to show you the list right here, it's basically looking up Toronto. Like this is a lookup list. Okay. So you're just looking up Toronto, right? And then what's the limit and how many are open, right? So that's kind of how I'm showing that. Okay. But this worksite day, um, this is a like a collection or records for the particular day. Okay. So it's really yeah, for that particular day. And so it's a variable essentially with for that particular day of offices. Okay. So um, so because this day is whatever 12/31, let's just say like this date, and I already pre-query that variable. Okay. Right? Like work sites for that day, and I'm getting the value of Toronto. Are how many open spots in Toronto? How many open spots in Ottawa? How many open in Montreal? And then the same for what's the limit for that day in Montreal, Ottawa, and Toronto? Okay, and then I show that data here. Okay, so that's kind of a technique from a UI that you get more flexibility, okay, on the look and feel, okay, on that. So let's see here, and uh, see here, let me show a day here. So that's kind of the end result, right? And you can see there was a bit of there was all zeros, but it was, loading up querying that data, okay? And this refresh button is here, like just in case, let's say an end user took up some days, okay, and you can kind of refresh, right, if it was already updated, to get kind of yeah, updated information. Okay, so I see a question from Joseph. Okay, there seems to be a lot of code on the screen. Do you have to write most of it, or is there a lot of GUI-based selections that will create the backend code? So in my case, I had to write a lot of this stuff, and it started off as simple, and then it's just simple logic, and then okay, well, let me try this, let me try that, and and it just kind of grown. You know what I mean? Over time. So and that's why I kind of split it up with a helper function by going through a button. So in terms of auto-generated, I haven't seen anything. I don't think one exists really of kind of auto-generated code, um, or sorry, you're asking about, is there a lot of GUI based that will create the backend code? Not really. That's kind of my understanding at this point. Okay, but yeah, thanks for the question. Okay, so moving on. So that's kind of how that works. Okay, so hit the save. Oh, okay, I'll show you how to trigger like the Power Automate. Okay, so go through here, the function button, kind of sudo helper function, which is just a button, right? And then you call it by by clicking on it, by saying calling the select function, right? When it's on select, then run this piece of code. Okay. Um, so at the very end, as long as there's no like errors, right? So I do error trapping. I'll talk about that in a bit, like error trapping, using the errors function and throwing into a variable. But as long as there's no errors at this point, then number one you do is submit form, okay, which basically like post the data, whatever was in this form, okay, the right here, this edit form 1, okay. Let's see here, so function updates, and saving it to its respective kind of the SharePoint list, okay. And then after that's done, you want to call and send an email, okay. So what I have here is button send email. And what this is doing is it has some, like, conditional kind of what do you call it, some logic to make sure that it passes, so that it's good to go. And then really you call a PowerApps.run, and the PowerApp, sorry, not Power Automate, is called is user email. Okay, and it's basically execute the Microsoft Flow or Power Automate flow. Okay, so that's kind of the bridge between a button click, right, to execute that Microsoft Flow. Okay, so let me show that flow. Let's see here. Let's see how to. It's been a while since. Oh, okay, UI changed. So add flow. Okay, let's click on this. So Power Automate. So in order to create it, that's where you go, right? And then you create a Power Apps button, right? And by doing so, um, you have a name of the button, and then you basically call it, okay? But where do I get to connectors? Trying to let's see here. Approvals. So this one, view, advanced. Action. Okay, I think the UI changed on me a bit here. How did I get to that? Let's see here. I'll go back to this one. Okay. You know what? Let me come back to that. I actually always forget. It's kind of the UI is not, well, for me, it's not too intuitive. Getting back to the, let's say the Power Automate thing. But okay, let me get back to that hopefully. But at least, let's see here, to how to start that up. You collect here, you add it, and then basically there's like an email, like a send email, whatever, flow, like task or step, okay, that you work with. Okay. Let's see here. So next thing is, okay, let me go back to my talking notes. Okay, so we talked about that variable declaration, the browse screen, edit, HTML table, which is this, and let's see here. So we talked about this, the saving. Okay, so we talked about that. Okay. Oh yeah. Let me go about like the Azure connectors. Okay. So so you click here. This is like the data tab, and you can select a bunch of connectors. Okay. See all connectors, and there's some that are Azure related. So um, So here's Azure Blob storage, but pretty much almost all of these are premium. Okay, so it comes at a heavy cost. Okay, so what Blob storage is just like a very basic storage account. Okay, that you can create, then store any kind of files or binary large objects. such as pictures or documents or anything. And it's quite scalable and, high volume, and it's very cheap, right? So the storage account is in the same kind of Azure AD directory as the Office 365 tenant I'm using, like in PowerApp, right? So this is um, a storage account. I call it PowerApp list, or yeah, container, and then I basically, store, any information as I like, any set of files into here, right? So in order to set that up, as you go through the process of connecting, it's going to prompt you for kind of your Azure AD credentials, such that you're granting that app access to that storage account. Okay. And as I've shown, you can take a photo, right, with the camera control, and basically, save that those files in here. Okay. So let's see here. And you can do, let's see, other services such as Azure App Service, in attempts of trying to call a function or an API. Okay. But to give you like in terms of giving advice and tips, yeah, like just kind of playing around with these like Azure like oriented containers. They're they're not pretty, they're, yeah, quite not there in terms of maturity and robustness, right? This thing is connected, but you know, I just can't see how I can call an API, right? Um, so like to get to the bottom line in terms of kind of advice is like, yeah, it's not mature. Kind of wait for it to have more support and more work into them. Okay. And really, when I kind of compare between like whether using SharePoint lists, or document library versus like a storage account, if you're pretty proficient with SharePoint, I would say, just stick with storing the files, let's say, of like your camera images into like a document library, right? And just work around or kind of manage or deal with the scalability kind of challenges that may come your way. Okay. And in terms of cost, I don't think it's that much of a like storage accounts are much cheaper, of course, but I think that these days the amount of data and how much you can store is very large anyways, that you kind of like not have that problem unless you're dealing with a huge amounts. So that's kind of what I wanted to touch upon with the kind of the Azure integration with kind of blob storage. Okay. um let's see here, any questions at this point? Yeah, another disadvantage is, yeah, you need to have a kind of a premium license as well. Okay, so so next thing talk about is kind of let's see, general let's say debugging. Okay, hold on, I want to close this and kind of open it back up. Oh, it's been modified. Okay. Okay. I felt like I modified some things in showing stuff, and hopefully it's still in a working state. But so some tips in terms of debugging. Okay, there's no okay, so there's two there is a debugger which I'll show that now. Okay. So let's see, how do you run this? So basically, um okay, okay. So you go to your apps, um, and you go to, let's say, you go to monitor. Okay. It says you have started a new monitor session. Okay, great. play the published app. Okay, and that monitoring session is what are quote unquote like hooked up, right? It's kind of you know, collecting data telemetry. Okay, so let's see here. So for example, let's just for today, let's say I add something, some information, and I say, okay, well, 6 people coming here. If I hit save, this Montreal number, it will go from 30 to 24. Okay, and hit save. And then when I go back, oops, did it go down? So for Montreal, yeah. Oh, sorry, it went from 50 to 44, Montreal. Okay. And so let's see how that the monitoring, how that picked that up. Let's see here. So here it kind of like you kind of had like a debug or tracing session happening right here. Okay. So let's see here. You do get rows. Okay, and then you kind of see, and it's really a like a REST call that's happening behind the scenes, right? And you see the details, and you see the data that was coming back. Okay. HTTP header responses. So here we see the like the actual list data, like the title, assessment date, employee. This is a SharePoint like person or people column. Okay, if you guys are aware, you know, a people column is really a kind of more of an object, right, that has multiple properties, right, as you see here. Okay, the editor column, right, modified, right, that's system level, like kind of system fields. And so this is how you can kind of debug and see kind of the data that's coming out. You know, sometimes a scenario that I've used this is where, um, you know, there's an issue with, let's say, white space, or if I were to import data through PowerShell, or I import data through or whatever, copy and paste, and sometimes you don't see the right results, right? And your logic is fine, your code is fine, but you're, you know, scratching your head like crazy and like what's going on. So, you know, this is how you can deeply go in, and maybe you can kind of spot, let's say, a funny character of some sort. You know, what I would do is I would copy this, you know, paste it into Notepad that will kind of you know, like kind of show it for what it is, you know, in terms of characters. So this is helpful in that regard. Okay. So this gets the rows and populates that browse screen. Okay, for that first screen. Now another example is, let's say, the save. Like, which one would be save? Patch row. Okay, so I believe this is I think this is a save, patch row. And we can see from here the data that was saved, right? So you can debug the data and what's been saved. Okay. Let's see here. And yeah, you can see kind of some performance and metrics. Okay. So hopefully you can use this to kind of debug the data in response codes. Okay. And see, there's some other tabs right here. This shows formula, request. Okay. So this is the request, and then the actual kind of response. Okay. Kind of raw response. I think this is similar to the details. Okay. So that's how you can kind of go through and at a very detailed level see kind of what's going on. Okay, step by step. Okay, that's one way of the debugging. Okay, but I find it helpful that this is not like a monitoring tool to monitor or debug like application logic. Okay, which I'll talk about in a next. Okay, so we can, let's see here.
I'm really sorry, Roy.
Yeah, no worries.
I've just
Hey, Dennis.
noticed, I've never paid attention to these buttons. You know, in the top right corner, there is invite and connect user. Does it mean I can connect to a user session there?
Yeah, I believe so. Like,
that is very cool.
Yeah, actually, this is new. I never seen this. I never noticed this myself. So according to this, invite people to join this monitor session. So I guess you know, like, you know, I can invite you. You know, you're part of this tenant, right? And then you can see, we can look at it together, right? You know, troubleshoot. So that's pretty cool. You know, so so why not? Or you're testing it, right? And then you're clicking buttons as well, and I see what's going on real time. So yeah, that's good for.
I guess that's useful for cases where somebody complains about an issue which you can't replicate. I wonder if that can be used for troubleshooting.
Yeah. So let's see here. Probably. Let's see here. So yeah, if a user comes and says, you know what, I did it XYZ and I don't know what's going on, but you have to activate it. You know what I mean? I don't think in, let's say in a production scenario, like this will monitor kind of 24/7. So, but I do see this play published app, and maybe by connecting or a user, right? Start a session with an end user that they can try to replicate their issue by connecting to their user session. So
you don't need to ask them. So you could somebody complains. Let's say you're on the phone in a hypothetical situation. You connect, type their name here, and then say, okay, can you try again? And then you kind of watch here what happens. I hope that's how it works. I never tried it. I've never seen it before. But if that's how it works, that's amazing.
Yeah, that is. Yeah, I think that's I think this is really amazing. The power of having things in the cloud enables to really collaborate, right? So yeah, thanks for bringing that up. You know, it's something that I'll like to check out myself. So okay. So let's see here. So okay, in terms of debugging, let's see here. So so some tricks. So yeah, that red sign means there's a monitoring session. Okay. See here. Okay, I got a lot. Okay, just close that. Close this. I just want to clear up my tabs. Okay. Okay, I already have it. Okay, I'll go to this one right here. So in terms of debugging, and actually this is what kind of Dennis gave me some tips, right? Is that if you want to see kind of some values, right? So you want to debug like variables. So let's say I have this this variable here called the user email, okay? And what I've normally done was through the browse gallery, I have like let's see here. Do I have? So basically, you can insert another label. Okay, label 2. Now where is that? Okay, and so it's kind of your debugging, right? So then you can say user email. So if I want to know what is the value of my user email at a certain point in time, you know, like that's what my user email looks like. Okay, because I'm showing what that variable is, right? I can also show let's see here. I'm not sure if it's going to show up, but like other variables, right? Or if I go like this plus index days, okay, shows the index days, which is value of 0. Okay, but anyways, that didn't show up, but you get the point, right? So you can display all your variable values.
It's an ampersand sign.
Oh, it's ampersand. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, instead of plus. Okay, I was scripting in in Bash today. So, or PowerShell. So you go and index, actually I use index day global. Oops.
Double quotes
Yeah,
instead of
double
single.
quotes. Yeah, you're right. So great, there we go. So, and then, as you click buttons, right, because it's very stateful, right? This type of application, like PowerApps, I mean. So when you hit, like, let's say index global days, right, the values of that may change. So, that index global days variable was 0, and each time I click on it, I'm incrementing and decrementing by 7 days. So that's an example of how you can debug real time and kind of, you roll your own kind of debug monitoring or console output, however way you want to say it, by putting like labels, or, if you want to trigger a certain like set of logic, you can create your own little button that will trigger, some logic like the save button or refresh button and stuff, right? So doing these techniques, having a label showing all the variables, I've heavily used that, right? And at the end of the day, you clean it up by either hiding it, okay, on the right, there's some kind of hidden, you can hide it, or just clean it up and delete it. So, just by cleaning it up helps with performance a little bit, right? So that is how you kind of do kind of debugging, okay? Let's see here. Anyone with any other questions? What else do I want to mention? So we went through that. So this is kind of a screenshot of my Power Automate or my flow, send email. So it's very simple. Like it takes on some parameters, okay, that I define. So the to and subject, right? What you want to say in the body, and you have to pass in the kind of the input parameters like the email and the subject line, into the flow, right, from PowerApps, okay, um, you connect it up, okay. So here is, like my hidden button that will, call out to that Power App, okay, and we'll trigger that flow, right? And then do email notification, right? Upon clicking any button or hitting save in your Power App, okay? So lastly, I'll talk about is just general backup and restore techniques. So there is versioning, okay? And you can restore from a version, okay? And, very helpful, very easy to use, okay? Another way of quote unquote backup is export the package, okay? Let me show what that looks like. So export package. And you just package it up, and you hit export, and then you download a zip file, basically, of sorts, okay? And it carries in various connection information dependencies. But you can't, from what I understand, is you can't just take this package and I would give it to somebody else and in a different tenant, okay, and then just restore. I don't think it works that well. Okay, so it's just a zip file with a XML or JSON in there, but you would restore it back into your own, let's say your own SharePoint site. Okay, let's see here. So,
Roy,
yeah.
When you restore that zip into another tenant, doesn't it prompt you as part of that to put in the connection credentials for that tenant so you can move it from environment to environment?
Yeah,
I know Power Automate does that, but and that was what Bill was alluding to. I'd be curious if they're doing similar things on the PowerApps that they're doing on the Power Automate to make that better.
Yeah. Like you can definitely try. Like if it was very simple export, right? So like even restoring it back to my own tenant, it got all messy, you know. So really, just kind of be careful. I guess the more complex it is, it'll try to restore in across tenants. Okay, like if it's very simple, like I see that happening, but like when you have all these type of dependencies, related resources, like it'll prompt you and do that, right? But what I'm
Yeah,
saying is just watch out.
Kind of raises a bigger point about environments, like the Power Automate, PowerApps, CDS teams have kind of decided, okay, you'll have one Azure AD tenant and you can have sandbox environments in that. So you can kind of do your dev, test, prod from that point of view. But I've always been of the opinion that your dev and test should have separate Azure AD and separate 365 tenants, because sometimes you want to do things in Azure AD or globally in SharePoint, like search schema and stuff like that. And you don't want to share that all in one prod tenant. So there's sort of this disconnect that the Dynamics group says, no, keep it all in one Azure AD and we'll have separate environments. And when you're doing the SharePoint development, it's like, no, I want to have different tenants.
Yeah.
They haven't really reconciled that.
Yeah, no, not at all. Like, yeah, I bang up against those scenarios, right? So, yeah, I think more work to be done, or considerations on the Microsoft side,
I mean, I like what they've done with the environments in the Power Platform, and the fact that you can create sandbox environments within that. It would be nice if you could have those connect to other Azure AD and 365 tenants as part of that, and kind of take it all the way.
Oh, for sure. Totally agree, right? Especially more sophisticated solutions that call for that, But yeah,
Yeah, just
definitely.
richer software development lifecycle.
Exactly. Yeah, just basic principles and SDLC, So, but yeah, like that's a capability of kind of export import, or you can call it backup restore in some cases, or promotion from environment to environment. But so that's a capability, and one can experiment kind of how it works for you or how it doesn't. Okay. But from kind of an in-place restore, there's the versioning. Okay, that works easier for me, right? So let's see, where do I go for that? Versions, right? So I've heavily used this versioning. It really is very useful, So and connections, flow. So okay, actually, let's open that up. So PowerApps notification. Let's see here. I think this is this is my flow. Open, edit. So yeah, this is my email notification here. And it by setting kind of your to and subject, this translates to input parameters into your flow, like in your PowerApp, so your flow button, or your flow button, I guess, um, so it's very simple, right? And that's how you get to it. I always forget how to get to it, and the UI is very confusing for me in terms of how to get back to my flow and how to wire things up. But yeah, I just wanted to share my experiences for what it's worth, and my various kind of techniques. I really enjoy PowerApps, to be honest. Like especially I come like beginning my career as a .NET developer, and with as the cloud kind of became more and more prevalent and mainstream. I did a lot of custom development in SharePoint Server with .NET, and then more and more like customers and clients say, don't code. We don't want you to code. Whatever. We'll just buy custom components from vendors and stuff. But yeah, I found this a great opportunity to even though you're not really kind of coding object-oriented programming, it's still, well, for me, it was still fun and engaging to kind of build a UI application and still kind of code using kind of the formula-based logic, right? And create something, you know, pretty cool and fascinating. So yeah, that's in summary kind of, I just want to show you my experiences and share my techniques, right? How I've in my own PowerApps development journey. So yeah, to end off, any final questions or, you know, or tips that I can provide? You know, anybody, yeah, want to, you know, learn PowerApps, you know, you can always email me, you know, you know, feel free to ask.
Roy, I mean, it's probably fair to say that this is not a no-code solution, right? I mean, it's different style coding, but it's still coding.
Yeah, it's still yeah, it's like low code, I guess you want to call it. But the thing is, I think it's marketed like Power Apps to be like, okay, it, you know, if you know how to use Excel formulas, you can do this, but totally not. You still have to have like that.
It's a developer mindset,
Yeah,
I think,
yeah,
still.
exactly. You need a developer mindset, like troubleshooting techniques and you know, designing for performance and scalability, things like that, right? And as as I've shown you, like that submit button logic, right? To have validation rules, like it grew, like you know, like it grew, like, you know, check if it's, you know, empty or false, then check this, you know, then set my variable, update that variable, and then check
Yeah, that's not
something
no
again.
code right there.
Yeah, exactly, right. And I don't, because it's not object oriented programming, you don't have like real exception handling or anything like that. Like you don't have the, you know, the, you know, yeah, like object oriented paradigms, you know, things like that, like real functional objects and properties. It's just formula based, right? Based on formulas or just, you know, simplistic functions. Okay.
I mean, what's your
So
sense coming from a developer mindset? I mean, myself and most of our team that sort of have a good web stack background that have tried this. I mean, we've done projects for clients with Power Apps, but at the end of the day, we kind of say, you know what, we'd rather build Angular or React and kind of have full control and not have the Power Apps get in our way. Because if we're going to write code, then just let us write code.
mhm.
I mean, where does
Yeah,
that balance that you find between saying, screw it, let's just build a full up interface ourselves versus using PowerApp?
yeah, no, that's definitely a good question, right? So something where your data is basic. Okay, we'll start off with the data. Your data is at most one parent-child relationship at most. Okay, and simple UI validation logic, right? You know, if true, if it's populated, if empty, and things like that. You know what I mean? But if you're gonna have, you know, let's say 3 data tables or you know, that multiplies the complexity is going to push into the front end. You know what I mean?
Right.
So I think that's maybe like a litmus test, like how much data tables you're going to have in the relationship. If you have a many to many, oh, forget that. Go with a custom coding. You know what I mean?
Right.
So that's one indicator. And also from a, if you want to look at it from a UI perspective, if it's simple forms based, okay, that you're just collecting data, okay, you do Power Apps, okay, and I guess where as long as that's simple and you want to leverage, let's say, the mobile capabilities, right? Because this thing could be used in a native mobile app, right, in your phone,
Right.
right? Use and also the camera, okay? Because doing camera, let's say Angular and whatever, is more difficult, okay? So those are the like kind of the parameters or, you know, factors where you want to decide on whether you want to go custom approach or Power Apps approach.
Right.
Yeah,
I would
but
add,
Okay.
that's a
I
great
would
question
also
though.
add that if you're dealing with one-to-many or many-to-many relationships, you
Mhm.
can use the common data service that handles that really well. I know it's a premium connector, but nevertheless, it does that.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. So you can do that for sure, as long as the UI logic, like that, the complexity of data, doesn't manifest with complex UI logic. You know what I mean? You have to handle relationships in the UI, like cascading drop-down lists. Because you have a parent-child relationship, right? Like that can get kind of you can go. I assume you can go Angular custom data, like custom apps front end, and have a CDS backend, perhaps, right? You can do that, but PowerApps is more the UI and business logic, right? So
yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
I haven't delved into the PowerApps CDS side, but I've talked to other people that have raved about that side of it. That yeah, it is pretty rich in that ecosystem, but I can't speak to it myself.
If you're looking for very high-end functionality in terms of the UI and all the bells and whistles of React and all those, then for sure custom code. But if your app doesn't need to be really 2020 look and feel
Cutting
and
edge. Yeah.
very fancy, then Power Platform should be good enough.
Okay. Thanks.
yeah, no, that's a very discussion and practical, and it comes to the table all the time when you're with customers and key stakeholders. So that's awesome. Anybody else? Questions or discussion points? Dennis?
I unfortunately I don't have questions, but maybe a few just quick tips, and it's just gonna I wrote them down, and I'm
Okay,
just gonna
cool. Yeah, we can
randomly
share that. Yeah.
randomly read them. So one is that I've learned it, and it wasn't the case maybe 2 years ago. So there is a new connector called send email, an email from a shared mailbox. And the cool thing about it is that you can control the from field. So it's not sent from your current account, but from the shared mailbox. And creating a shared mailbox is quick. You can the dirtier way is to create a new team. You can call it, let's say, COVID-19 screening team, or just, and then that's going to be your from email, which is kind of easy.
Okay.
And another thing that I've learned, it's, how PowerApps is not really great at scaling. If you reduce the size of the window, maximize it, the images just get very blurry. But I've discovered if you use SVG images, that doesn't get blurry at all.
Okay, cool. Okay.
So check it out if you want to. If you are disgusted by the blurriness, that SVG is your friend. But it has to be a vector graphic, of course. You can't. So what else? Yeah, that's it for now.
Okay, cool. All right. Well, thanks everyone. Hopefully you had some learning points and feel very motivated to try PowerApps. And if you have any questions, you can always reach out to me. Um, and yeah, so I hand it back to you, Peter.
Sure. Thank you, Roy. That was a great session.
Thank you.
Had a question in the chat. Yes, we do have the recording will be going up. So I've posted the YouTube link for the TSPUG channel in there. It is on the top level meetup page for TSPUG as well, so you can find it there. So give me some time to get it downloaded from Streamed and load it up into YouTube, but we should have that up there tomorrow from there. Other than that, I just want to say thanks to Roy for putting together a great session. And thanks everybody for joining in.
Okay, great. Thank you. Okay.
All right. Thanks everybody.
All right, bye.
Thank you. Have a nice evening.
Bye.
Thanks.
Bye.